So we will, I do ask, and I see that I think everyone has muted their mics until the end when you're called upon, if you have a question or wish to speak. So this webinar, Land Acknowledgement, How to Create a Respectful Statement, is offered by special request. A member who was unable to attend the session at last year's conference asked if we would consider offering it as a webinar. And the number of registrants show that other people regret having missed it last summer as well. And thankfully, Jamie was willing to offer the session again. In this webinar, Jamie Kishko will explain the meaning and importance of land acknowledgements to all of us and our relationship with each other and with the land, as well as providing advice on how to draft a respectful and sincere land acknowledgement statement. So, Jamie, it's all yours.
All right, miigwech for that. So I'm just gonna do a little opening. I've already smudged, so sending out those good kind thoughts. Um, I just wanted to just a little opening, not too long. So Creator placed the Anishinaabe on the earth along with the gift of spirituality. Here on Mother Earth, there were gifts given to the Anishinaabe to look after: fire, water, earth, and wind. The Creator also gave the Anishinaabe 7 sacred gifts to guide them. They are love, truth, respect, wisdom, humility, honesty, and bravery. Creator gave us sovereignty to govern ourselves, and we honor and respect the past, present, and future. So miigwech. I am coming to you from the Three Fires Confederacy territory, the historical territory of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi, and of my relations and my ancestors, the Anishinaabe people, Anishinaabe. So with that, I am going to begin. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, I always encourage people to write them down or make sure you take note of them because, I'm not going to be talking forever, even though it might seem like that. But I do like to hear from you all, especially if you have questions or comments, okay? So with that, I'm going to begin. Bujuani, Niganasque, Indigenous, Dashkan, Zibing, and Dunjaba, Ajit, Kandoram. And what I said there was my Anishinaabe Moan name is Leading Light Woman. And I'm from Chippewa, the Thames First Nations Reserve, located outside of London, Ontario, about 20 minutes outside of London, Ontario. And I'm from the Crane Clan. So being from the Crane Clan, part of my responsibility is to help bridge nation to nation relationships and help those relationships grow and flourish. So that's what I hope to do here today with you all. In this picture, you'll see there's me and my dog Roxy. I am sitting on what is currently my land, 8 acres, located within Chippewa the Thames First Nations Reserve. It's untouched. I haven't developed it. I haven't done anything with it. And I hope to keep it that way. As you can see, it's a great source of food for bees who are struggling. And the picture to the right is one that I took when I was out in Kelowna, BC. I had never been out to Kelowna, BC, and I have to be honest with you all, flying in over the mountains had quite an impact on me. I had never seen the mountains like that until I'm 47. I'm going to be 48. So having that connection to the land, both here at home and away, is very integral to my own spirit and my own being. And it's important for me to have connections to the land because it's what sustains me. It's what sustains all of us. So by the end of this session, I'm hoping that you'll learn why land acknowledgements are important and how do we acknowledge territory. How do we do it respectfully? Do we have to do it? Do we have to have a land acknowledgement? Um, and other questions like that that I've heard throughout my time since I've been doing these presentations. So let's get right into it. Why land acknowledgements are important. So, if you've heard of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you've heard that there are calls to actions for various levels of government, provincial, municipal, and federal. The calls to action are not mandated by the government for any post-secondary institute to embrace or to uh, to make part of their university campus. However, universities are realizing that reconciliation starts with action. And what better way to start with action than to follow the recommendations that come from survivors of residential schools? So, land acknowledgements are a way that people insert an awareness of Indigenous presence and land rights in everyday life. This is often done at the beginning of ceremonies, lectures, or in this case, an educational webinar. It can be explicit yet limited in the way to recognize the history of colonialism and First Nations, as well as a need for a change in those in settler colonial societies. In this context, we're looking to acknowledge the existence of the Indigenous bodies in geography and how they occupy land. So often, territorial acknowledgements are concise and are along the lines of, I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of, and you would say the nation's names. Some people may also mention the name of a local treaty. So if you are situated where there's a treaty, you would mention that. And some people even say, I'm on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy that was never ceded. And for people hearing that word ceded or unceded, it may be a little bit foreign to them. So, but unceded means it was never given. It was never, there was no permission to give it, to take it. Um, if you are not sure how to pronounce a nation's name, there are a number of ways to learn. So I've discovered Google actually can pronounce like Haudenosaunee, for instance, pretty on point. But if you're uncomfortable with going to Google, which most people are, and that's understandable, there are a number of ways you can outreach to learn how to say these names. And so you might want to begin with your local Can-Am Indigenous Friendship Center, or maybe you have an Aboriginal Education Center that's nearby, and you could reach out to that person and ask them. Or you could check the nation's website that's closest to you. And then, I know the days of picking up a phone and actually calling people are like uh, considered to be in the past, but some nations still function that way. And so when you pick up the phone and dial that nation's number, you can say, hello. I'm starting to craft my land acknowledgement and I want to make sure that I pronounce your nation's name correctly. Could you help me? And I find that when you're honest about looking for help, people are usually apt to help you. Like I myself, if somebody asks for help, I'm not I'm not going to turn them down, and I'm not going to be standoffish about it. But that's me. That's me. So territorial land acknowledgements. Again, you heard me say in the beginning that some people do them, some people might not want to do them, and that's fine. That's okay. If you don't want to do a land acknowledgement, if you're still uncomfortable with it, I would suggest that you sit with it for a little bit longer. Most of the work that goes into a land acknowledgement is reflection, which is why I'm going to be talking a lot today rather than, um, you know, maybe you're used to being put in breakout rooms or whatnot. But for the most part, this is personal reflection. I'll be honest with you. It's about reflecting on who you are, how you got to be to where you are, and how your family got to be to where you are. Because I know my family has been here since time immemorial. My ancestors, my grandfathers, my grandmothers, they've always been raised in Three Fires Confederacy territory. We have not come from any place else. Oops. So let me just move this. These are the questions that you may find it helpful to reflect on, and you might have to do some research into your own family. And I totally understand if your own family is a family that maybe you don't want to do an in-depth research on. That's fine. But figuring out where your roots came from is the most important part of this reflection. So, why is this acknowledgement happening? Are you leading a meeting? Are you checking a box? Are you doing it because you want to do it? Or are you doing it because you have to do it? How does this land acknowledgement relate to the event or work you are doing? What is the history of the territory that you're on? What are the impacts of colonialism there? What is your relationship to this territory? How did you come to be here? What intentions do you have to disrupt and dismantle colonialism beyond this territory acknowledgement? So what action are you going to put behind it? So some people strive to, they'll write a land acknowledgement and say they're on the traditional territory of Three Fires Confederacy. I'm just going to keep using my territory as an example. But maybe they didn't know that there was an Indian Act and how much that Indian Act impacts First Nations lives even in 2024. So maybe that person might make a commitment to say, I'm going to learn more about the Indian Act and how it impacts First Nations day to day. Or I'm going to learn about treaties because we're all treaty people. We are. And your kids are, and your grandkids are, and your great great grandkids will be. So it's important to know what treaty affects the territory that you're in. Is it ceded? Is it unceded land? Knowing that would be a great thing to know because not a lot of people know that most of the land in North America, 0.02% of it belongs to First Nations people. The rest is Crown land. So that's why land is so important to us because we have very little left. How did you come to be here? What intentions do you have to disrupt? I'm sorry, I read that already. I get so excited about these things. So here's Hayden King, and he wrote the land acknowledgement for Ryerson University, which is now known as Toronto Metropolitan University. And when he wrote it, he said that it was written in a rush. Um, And he thought he was writing it for more like awareness and, to make sure that there was some education going on. But after he wrote it, he could see how a land acknowledgement becomes an easy way to check off a box. So is a university, um, you know, uh, actually trying to do some reconciliation work and decolonization work? Well, sure, here's our land acknowledgement. That's not what land acknowledgements are for. Traditionally, the way that I was taught was that land acknowledgements weren't called land acknowledgements, but they were, if we saw somebody coming across the river and we couldn't recognize if they were friend or foe, usually they would be wearing something like a wampum belt to let us know. And so when they would approach our community, our territory, they would say, "This is who I am. I'm coming as a friend. I'm looking for some information, like where to find the best grounds to get some deer meat or for hunt for deer." Um, so in the past, land acknowledgements weren't, we didn't stand up and say, we're from the traditional territory. We would stand up and state who we are, what clan we came from, who we're representing, what our business is. And sometimes that might take a few days. Sometimes it could take a couple weeks. It just depended. So Hayden King said that he thought that territorial acknowledgements is by and large for non-native people. And so if we're writing a script and then providing a phonetic guide for how to recite the nation's names, then it doesn't really require much work on behalf of the people who are reciting that territorial land acknowledgement. So what he's saying is anybody can get up and say, I'm on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy, but what do you know about that Three Fires Confederacy? Do you know that the Three Fires Confederacy is considered a brotherhood between the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi? So that's the kind of in-depth um, impact that the land acknowledgement should have. It should want you to learn, want to learn more, be going beyond the pronunciation of how to say those nations' names. So the next slide is a sketch from the Baroness Mon sketch show. And it pokes fun at the land acknowledgement. And if you know anything about Indigenous peoples, you know that we use humor. We use humor a lot to make sense of our world and make sense of what's going on out there. So I hope you enjoy this next clip. I believe it's almost maybe 8 minutes long. I can't rightly remember, but as she's going through it, just know that what's going on in here, that lady's not alone in the way that she thinks. Both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people think this way. They have these same thoughts. All right, gotta move my little picture bar again. There we go. Okay, I hope that this plays for you. And that you can hear it. Is it playing? Okay.
Jamie, I can't hear it. Not sure why.
Let me see here. Okay, first, let's why is it fighting me? Pause. It's fighting me. It wants to play. Let's see if we can't share. Better? All right. Thank you for letting me know.
Hello. First, I'd like to remind everyone here to turn off your cell phones. Before we begin this evening's performance, we would like to acknowledge that this theater stands on territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Petun First Nations. We are also mindful of broken covenants and the need to make right with all our relations. And now, please enjoy the show.
Oh, sorry, hello? Sorry, excuse me, should we go?
Excuse me?
Oh, no, I just mean if we're on someone else's land, shouldn't we leave?
Oh, no. The theater is here now. We'd just like to acknowledge whose land it is.
I'm sorry, I'm so confused. So if we're on someone else's land, shouldn't we do something about that, or?
Hopefully we'll enjoy the performance.
Oh, okay, so some of the money from the ticket sales of the show are going to the Indigenous communities?
Well, no.
Oh, a portion of them?
No, the ticket sales go to the theater.
So is the money from the bottled water sold here going to the First Nations for clean drinking water, or?
Oh, no, that money goes to Nestle.
Nestle.
They're a sponsor.
I'm so sorry. I'm so confused. So whose land are we on? What are we doing?
It's a dialogue.
How are we making right?
Well, there's a plaque you can read in the lobby.
I don't understand.
I'm getting a message from the stage manager that we need to begin the show, so please take your seats.
But,
Have a good time.
but,
Good night.
guess I'll sit down. Enjoy the show. Just enjoy the show.
All right. And so let's see if I can't. There we go. It's just gonna keep playing. Oh, okay. That's all right. Okay. So when I looked up this, the producers and the creators of the skit, Aurora Brown is her name, but Carolyn Taylor wrote this sketch. And Aurora Brown says about Carolyn Taylor that she thought it was such a well thought out dissection of hypocrisy and lip service, right? I mean, we've all been to these things. I know I was recently at Stratford, and they did a land acknowledgement as well. And I'm not, I'm not downplaying the sincerity of the land acknowledgements, but really, unless there's an action behind it, it really just does play to the lip service. So Aurora Brown says, from what I've seen, the reaction has been almost completely positive from this sketch. She's seen a few Indigenous people retweet this sketch. Mostly the reaction has been from white people saying that they felt the same sense of a disappointment in the empty lip service, which kind of gives me comfort. Like, I'm glad that people are finding that it's, kind of like a check in the box. So she goes on to say she thinks that the more important reaction is to be honest, right? And this is what I'm talking about when you're writing your land acknowledgement. If this isn't the time for you to write it, don't make yourself write it, because people are going to see that you're struggling with it. Indigenous leaders already know that our words have been historically pretty empty. So non-Indigenous people always talking but never following through. Change only comes when non-Indigenous people do it. So that was from Aurora Brown, who was interviewing Carolyn Taylor on this sketch. So now we're going to look at one of the resources, and it's called nativeland.ca. To use this resource, you're going to need your device or a computer, desktop, or laptop. It offers an online platform. So you're going to interact with this online platform. And this isn't the only one. I actually found another one that I'll show to you in a little bit. The map and the questions it raises are designed to encourage the user of nativeland.ca to engage with the history of both indigeneity and colonialism. So it's not just created to show you where the treaties are or, territorial land, but it's also created to make you think about the history of the land that you're looking up. So there's a lot of questions embedded in the use of these maps, such as what time periods are represented, who counts as Indigenous, and is therefore represented on the map. Why is the rest of the world not mapped? Why are there overlapping territories in some areas and not in others? Why do the names of nations sometimes differ so much from the common names that Western culture is familiar with? What does it mean to say that we are on native land? So again, users can reach out to the Indigenous nation through the links provided. We're going to go through that in a little bit and try to learn a little of the local language, like how to say Haudenosaunee or how to say Anishinaabe or even Lene Lenape. You can dive into the history, or in any case, The deeper purpose of nativeland.ca is to plant a seed of consciousness into you, the user, that will hopefully get you thinking critically and comprehensively about Indigenous history, especially where my ancestors live, where they hunted, where they held ceremony, where they held celebrations. And I don't think it would be a bad thing to learn these because I don't know about you, but when I went to high school, Native studies was like a blip in somebody's book, something to go on their CV. So it wasn't taken seriously, at least in my experience. I've seen some really good changes in the Ontario curriculum, but after Ford came in, he squashed a lot of the Indigenous knowledges that were happening for Indigenous curriculum. So again, to use this resource, you're going to need your computer or your phone. You're going to look up Native Land or Native Land in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. And, I'll give you time to do that. And then we're going to go through it together. So bear with me because, technology is always such a touchy uh, entity. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But here's what I want you to do in case it doesn't work on my end. I want you to go into nativeland.ca and I want you to start exploring. I want you to start playing with the toggles because there's toggles there. I want you to type in, where you're from, not where you're at now, but, where you grew up. Where'd you grow up? Type that into the search bar and see what you get. So I'm just going to go ahead here. So this is what it looks like when it pops up, right? Something else will pop up, information window, and then you'll close that. But here's what I'm talking about. So in that search bar, you're gonna put, I'll put Windsor, Ontario. And these toggles up here, you can turn them on, you can turn them off. Um, myself, you know, depending on what I'm looking for, I might turn territories off and leave on languages, for example. So when you land on the map, you will see a zoomed out view of North America and Australia if your screen is large enough. This can be overwhelming because of the vast array of colors and shapes. I totally understand that. And that's unfamiliar to most people. So it's okay if you're a little bit taken aback. That's fine. That's normal. Um, Zoom in and mouse around, and you will see shapes highlighted and a small pop-up showing the names of the nations you are mousing over. You can click on any shape or any area on the map, and on the left, you will see a few links appear with the nations that exist in the area that you clicked on. You can you can then visit these links to learn more about sources, further links, and official websites related to those nations. Now, I got to be honest with you. This is what I would call a always growing website because the information in this website is not definite. So there might be little things that they're missing, and they actually encourage you to reach out to them if there's something missing or if something's spelled wrong or if you notice anything like that. Um, The maps automatically start with the territories toggle turned on. You can layer the languages or treaties toggles on top of this, but it can become very difficult to understand and see what is happening. Try turning one off and then another, and then mousing over some parts and bits, and then just play with it, right? See how the treaty areas, languages, and territories are related to each other, or sometimes they're completely unrelated, right? All right, let's see if this will work for me. No, let's see. So I clicked that, and am I sharing my screen still? You can see the maps there. Okay, good. It's working. Technology is on my side today. All right, so I'm going to put in Windsor. And so we see Windsor, Ontario, Canada pop up, right? I'm just going to leave it on territories.
No, I don't see your map. I
Oh, you
just see
do.
your slide that says, let's explore. Does
Okay,
everybody else see the map?
I'm going to try share again.
Yeah, thanks.
That's all right. Thank you for letting me know. How's that? Yeah, all right. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, right? It could be, first time I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's not a whole lot of information. But then you see where my mouse is and how Wyandotte popped up, and then beneath that you've got some other nations there, like Anishinaabe, Adirondack, Mississauga, and Miamia. So if we go over here and it says contact local nations to verify, right? Just gonna click on Mia. And then it takes you to this page. And remember I was telling you if you notice anything about spelling or anything like that, please let us know if you have any corrections or improvements we can make. There's their message right there. Um, and then so I'm gonna zoom out, but we can see where the traditional territory of the Miami people were. It's highlighted there in that green. And then if I go down, um, I click that link, it takes me right to their web page. So in a way, you're not spending a whole lot of time Googling it, or in my case, what happens is I get frustrated because the spelling of the nations is so different, right? So um, even here, hello, we are glad you have come to visit us. In my language, that's bonjour, bindigan, which means welcome, come on in. So we have different dialects, right? Um, okay, no, skip. There we go. So now we're going to look at the toggles. So I'm going to toggle off treaties and then languages. And then when I hover over that green part, you can see Bodawa Deminwen comes up. And I imagine that's Potawatomi. That's another way of saying that word. If I go down over here, there's not a whole lot that pops up. Let's go over here to colors. What happens with colors? Ah, it toggles on and off with the colors. Okay. Okay. OpenStreetMap labels. What happens there? And there we get the streets. So, say you find out that the traditional territory, right? But I can see where that is in Windsor. So, every time I play with this app, I always learn something new too. Now, let's look at the treaties. I'm going to toggle off languages, territories, treaties. And then the treaties pop up. So Windsor is located in the Treaty 2 territory of 1790. So that's what makes this, in my opinion, a good resource, because the people, the folks that organize this and run this website are open to any corrections or comments, or if you have anything that would, hey, this nation was in this area at this time and you have documentation that can support that, they'll gladly put that into the map, which is what I like. It's not no, we did this work, we know what we're doing type of thing. Which if, you're doing research, can be intimidating when it comes to First Nations and Indigenous people. Okay, now back to my screen. Oh, I gotta stop sharing. That's why. Okay. Stop sharing this one and go back to the PowerPoint. Yes. Okay, there we go. So if you have it on your personal device, it's a little bit more trickier on the cell phone, I find for myself, because it's so small and detailed. I do like using the computer, the bigger screen that the desktop allows you to use. But again, don't feel bad if if you're on your device. That's just what you have at the moment. So there are a few other important distinctions to keep in mind. Nativeland.ca places little emphasis on the exact geographic precision, opting to sketch shapes more generally. So that may be why when you see the colors of the territories or where the treaties are, it's not traditionally lined up in a map, so to say, right? In that style. Native land has not rigorously documented its sources throughout its history. Many sources come from easily discovered online maps or discussions, but others have come from emails, books, or other sources. And this is what I like to call being transparent about where they find their information. Native land can be improved by anyone who wants to email in and who can provide a reasonable source for their update. And they're constantly updating and changing, and this does not represent a solid, complete source of information. So in other words, you know how you go out and you get estimates for things? Like you get 3 estimates usually. That's how I grew up. You need something, you get 3 estimates. This is what I would suggest that you do. If you're uncomfortable or if it's just not sitting right with you. And I did actually find another site that has another map. Um, so the pros of the map is that it's built quickly and can relatively and easily add new nations, languages, or treaties. It's not bound by academic requirements or rigorous source methods. This map is crowdsourced, meaning that Indigenous and non-Indigenous people alike can participate in it. This map is easy to use for users of many ages and encourages engagement by allowing users to search any location. So how we know the land, right? Land is pedagogy. So stories from the land. Now this is talking about more connection. So this is more, I thought this was important because I showed you at the beginning of this presentation my connection to the land, both personally and professionally. Personally, I've got 8 acres that I'm in charge of that I have to take care of. Professionally, I get to go around and see other territories and how they live on the land or how they give respect to their land historically, right? But doing that, I want you to think about the land that you live on, right? So when we think about land, we often see it as a large body that exists to host our needs as peoples, animals, and plants. It provides us resources that give us nourishment, and in turn, we create our own ecosystems that revolve around it. So in the ever evolving conversation on environmentalism, for example, the land is seen as something that must be protected and cared for. Otherwise, there's not going to be any resources left. In Indigenous teachings, the relationship between humans and the land has always been discussed, as Indigenous people hold the land up both as a living being and a teacher. Living lightly on the land has always been emphasized as a means of minimizing environmental impact and ensuring a continued quality of life for future generations to come. And so when I'm talking about future generations, I'm talking about at least the next 7 generations that are coming. Looking at the land from an Indigenous perspective means understanding that the land is a living being. This understanding both gives us insight into and increases our awareness of how we treat and interact, not only with the land, but with each other. From a classroom perspective, or from this webinar perspective, using the land as a teacher allows us to breathe life into the maps that we look at, right? So, we all look at maps, Google Maps, how do we get from point A to point B? And that's about as far as it gets. You don't think about the road that you're driving on. You don't think about the road that you're driving on, what it's driving through. You're just on a road, you're getting from point A to point B. This map wants you to think about the territory that you're driving through and how that came to be. How were you able to drive through Hamilton to get through to Toronto? The exercises that are included here are meant to help you explore these spaces. So these exercises that I've included, again, personal, reflective. I don't expect people to lay out their family history in this session or anything. I mean, if you want to share, if and you want to share, I'm not against that either, but there's no pressure. That's what I'm trying to say. So while these exercises that I have included in this for reference, and at the end, because I'll be sending this out to Kim, who can then disseminate this PowerPoint slide to you all. The exercises might seem a little bit elementary, but again, I ask you to think about, what did you learn when you were in elementary, and then high school, and then post-secondary? If you had contact with a great teacher who taught you some of these things, great. But chances are you didn't. So it's not saying that, I don't think people are capable of that higher thinking when it comes to land acknowledgements. It's just that you have to start humble. One of the teachings. So there was a podcast, and what are we at? 114. Okay. There was a podcast. It's a long one. I think it's about 20 to 30 minutes. And this is going to get you thinking about, the relationship that Indigenous peoples have with the land. And what that teaches us. I mean, even myself, what does that teach me? I'm Indigenous. Um, what does it mean when I hear somebody talking about moose hide camp? What does that mean? Does that mean that we're going to go out and hunt moose? Does that mean that somebody's already hunted the moose and I have to process it? Well, like, I have to tan it, I have to hide it, have to do the hide thing, you know? What does it mean? So I strongly encourage you to listen to this podcast, um, and just kind of, listen for those relationships, not between the humans, but between the humans and the land. It's a good podcast. So, audio recordings of stories and activities on land are important for Indigenous peoples as they pass down forms of knowledge and allow others to experience spiritual, social, and political forms of growth. Many Indigenous communities only pass down history through oral retellings, which makes audio recordings especially important. So I really hope you do enjoy this one. By listening to these moments being captured, we are able to see the land through others' eyes and connect with their experiences. So remember, your goal when you listen to this podcast is to listen, to have, how did they get that knowledge of how Indigenous people interact and have relations for the land? How do they do that? Was it something that was passed down from their grandma and grandpa? So here we come to the meaty part, what you're here for, right? Writing a land acknowledgement, I can't give you a formula. I can't give you a structure because reflection is required. Reflection of your family history, reflection of knowing the land that you're sitting on or that you're working on or playing on. Um, you know, it's a lot of reflection, which is why I appreciate that people struggle with it and don't have one right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was that kid in school that got that wanted to be done first. That's not what this is. This is, you don't want to be done first with this one. You want to take your time. You want to reflect. So, what makes a good land acknowledgement? Knowing the history of the indigenous territory you're on. Remember in that skit I showed you? She said, um, "Are we giving the land back? Are we donating the money to an indigenous cause? Where's the money going from the ticket sales? Where's the money going from the water bottle sales?" Personal commitment to action. That's what that part of that skit was speaking to. All right. So while I don't expect people to up and just be like, here, I've got this house I paid off. Took me 100 years to pay it off, but I'm going to give it to you. That's not my expectation. My expectation is that you become educated through your self-reflection, through looking at your family and how they came to be here. So again, a personal commitment to action could be, I'm going to learn more about murdered and missing Indigenous women. Why? Why was there an inquiry? I'm going to learn more about Orange Shirt Day. Why do we have Orange Shirt Day? I'm going to learn more about the treaties in this territory. That way, when somebody says, that doesn't even concern them, they should be happy for that. We have an ally out here that says, wait a minute, during my self-reflection and when I was trying to write a land acknowledgement, I learned da 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 da. Because it'd be great to have more allies out there. History. What is the history of this land? And I also think it's pretty cool, because then you either talk to older family members or maybe maybe your parents or your older family members aren't around, but then there's their friends, there's their other family members, and it's just a great way to learn about your own family. Because I mean, I could share all day about my family, but it'd be great to learn about your family. And so what makes a bad land acknowledgement? Well, this was a land acknowledgement that existed at one time. I think it was up for a day at Vancouver Island University, and then they took it down. Vancouver Island University acknowledges that we're located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Sunio-Mooks people, and we thank them for allowing us to live, laugh, love, and learn here. Now, I don't know about you, but live, laugh, and love is a pretty common decorator piece that you see in those, home scents and all those types of places. So yeah, it was up for a day and then they took it down. This is ticking the box and then, kind of like slapping people in the face with it. So this is something that you don't want to do. And I don't think for the most part, the people that I've talked to about land acknowledgements, I don't think that they start out with this in mind. So I'm happy for that. And here's an example of my community, Chippewa Thames. They worked with the City of London. Here's an example of their land acknowledgement. I'm going to share sound again. Oh, it's already on. Okay, so hopefully it works. Thumbs up if you can hear that.
Gully.
Ani.
Kolomosi.
Welcome.
We acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee people.
the Anishinaabeg people,
Muncie, Delaware, Lenni, Lenape.
and Attawandaron people.
We honor and respect the history, language, and culture
of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home,
including our neighboring communities.
Chippewas of the Thames First Nation,
Muncie, Delaware, Lenni, Lenape.
Oneida Nation of the Thames.
and the many other First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people that have called these lands home for thousands of years.
We shall not ignore history,
but learn and grow from it.
Ani,
Kolomosi.
Sagoli.
Hello and welcome to the territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Pewak, and Attawandaron people.
So that was a great example of an organizational land acknowledgement. And that's usually what you'll find in the norm. Organizations don't do too much about trying to put an action behind their land acknowledgement, which is why most folks really don't care for land acknowledgements when they come from organizations. We need a follow-up action. We appreciate that you've made the land acknowledgement and that you've done it in partnership with the following communities. But there needs to be an actionable item behind that land acknowledgement, behind every organization's land acknowledgement, not just the City of London. I don't want to make it seem like I'm picking on them. Great resource from Concordia University. Okay, I'm going to click on that, then I got to stop sharing, and then I'm going to share that. All right, here we go. The reason why I like Concordia's land acknowledgement page is because they've done their own land acknowledgement, and I'll let you go back and watch that on your own. But down here, they give you a history. They give you a history of why they've done this. But here's the best part. How and why we worded the acknowledgement this way, line by line. And if I had it my way, every organization, every university would have it set up like this. So they give you a little bit of the history about how they came to do this land acknowledgement together. And then if you click on these arrows, you know, a little paragraph of information for you. The area in Montreal was known as a gathering place for many First Nations. I didn't know that. I did not know that. And it's been like that since time immemorial. Today it's home to diverse populations, as is London. Excuse me. They respect the continued connections. And so they have a lot of resources here, and I highly recommend checking out Concordia's resources should you get stuck. And of course, you can always contact me. I have an open door policy. So, Majta, Majta, Majta. You're going to get started on your writing your own land acknowledgement. And the purpose of writing your own land acknowledgement, that's the activity, is the land acknowledgement, is so that you can begin thinking about how to create yours. So those questions, right, in the beginning, do you remember? Where did your ancestors come from? How did you come to live where you are now? Why did your ancestors come to this land? Did you ever get to visit your ancestral land? Why is it important to learn the history of the land on which you live? And what can you learn from the land that you do live on? So remember when I said you're driving through Hamilton, you're on the 401. Why are we driving through Hamilton on the 401 going to Toronto? What is the significance of that land in between those two cities? Is there a significance? Uh, so once you get started with this, you might find that your land acknowledgement might end up being 2 pages. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that because again, you're reflecting. This is, you know, you're going to refine your land acknowledgement and you're going to keep going back and forth until, you know, you get it to where you like it. So here's those questions that I was reading. And I strongly suggest that, you know, if you want to get together with somebody and go over these questions, that's up to you. That's up to you. But I'm not one to make people talk about their families because I don't know the history of some people's families. Some people might have really negative history with their own families, so that's why I don't push for breakout groups to do this work. I don't want people put off or be uncomfortable. But if you're sitting next to your friend and you're both working on it, sure, talk about it. Absolutely. You'd be surprised at what you learn from your friend and what your friend will learn from you. And so with that, I'm going to say Chimigwech. I will share this PowerPoint with Kim and then or somebody from call so that they can share it with you all. And then you'll have those questions, you'll have the links, and then of course you'll have the resources and the references, okay? It's a little step. Don't be hard on yourselves. Don't, you know, this is not an A+ type of situation. Nobody's getting graded for this. You know, all I ask is that when you are doing a land acknowledgement, if you decide to do one, is that you're honest. You're honest with yourself about who you are and where you come from and what that afforded you, right? Because, like I said, 0.02% of Canada belongs to First Nations. The rest belongs to the Crown. And with that, I'll say Chimigwech. Thank you for being here with me today. I appreciate the invite. I do think this work is important, and I do really think it's a way that we can start bridging our nations together and, you know, start building those relationships so that I can share knowledge with you. You can share knowledge with me. We'll have a reciprocal relationship, and that's how we begin. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I have to say that you really made me reflect during this session and reflect back to my childhood growing up in northern Manitoba in an isolated town and the connection I had there with everyone. So whether they were settlers or Indigenous peoples and going to school, and it was a different type of relationship than what I have now, I have to say. And so reflecting back was really, it really affected me. So just checking, does anybody have any questions? I see that Melanie asked a question about native land. And you may not know this, but she asked if there was a way to link to a specific map display, or should she use the print function to export it? From there. Do you know if you can actually save a link to a specific view that you created?
That's a good question, and I've never done that. Let's see. Let's go try it out right now.
I printed off the map for, again, where I grew up, and you know, when I grew up, I didn't realize there were so many different nations. I mean, I grew up in you know, it was Cree country, and I had no idea just how many different grew up in Manitoba. I mean, that's basically you know, it's the biggest nation there.
And you say link, right? So do you mean if I were to hit like Wyandotte?
I think she meant a picture of the actual map, if you went back there.
Oh,
Yeah, so you could see how things
no.
overlaid.
Yeah, I haven't figured that out yet. I mean, and it's something that you could contact the creators too and ask them.
Oh, Melanie, you've got your hand up. It was your question. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. And I'm sorry to take over, but I found the presentation so wonderful and I thank you for yeah, I found hitting the little printer button will generate an image, which is okay, you know, depending what you're trying to do, but that's fine. My two questions, and I don't know if you have time to answer them, are just two things I struggle with. So say at the Bar Association, they have a set land acknowledgement that we read every time we get together. And I've read it many, many times, and it's long and it just everybody knows what it is. At the midwinter meeting, it was read at every session before every lunch. And I felt like we were reciting the Pledge of Allegiance or something, like everybody knew what was coming. And so I'd just love for, I know the answer would be, you know, if you're obligated to give a statement on behalf of an organization, you give the statement, but perhaps adding a personal one, you know, in addition, maybe that's the answer to get away from the roteness and the very, you know, the rigidity of some of those older statements. And I
Yes.
guess a somewhat related question is just, so I work at a court and there are some like institutional, how do I say it? Hesitancies about having a statement, any sort of, I don't know, maybe people in other parts of Canada, courts are doing them. The legislature here really struggled for a while about whether they would have a land acknowledgement, and we finally have got one. But yeah, if you're in a situation where the organization you work for does not have a statement at this time, just thoughts for getting the process started or how one works within that structure.
Good question, Melanie. Thank you. So what I find organizations doing is, for example, let's use the School of Business here. So the School of Business here has decided to ask at their faculty meetings that their faculty start developing their own land acknowledgements that they can take turns reading. So it kind of takes away that redundancy, that, you know, checking off the box. Yeah, we're reading this, but we don't really, nobody practices it. Nobody believes it. And I get it. I totally get it. That's why that faculty decided it to do it that way. Because if everybody is thinking about it, and land acknowledgements impact people differently. That's just the way it is. We didn't all grow up in Windsor, Ontario together. You know, we all grew up in different cities, different territories. We all had different experiences. So making it personal, a little bit personal, is not a bad thing. And I think for the most part, organizations and governments are hesitant about land acknowledgements because it is about accountability. So they have to be very careful about what they're going to be accountable for. That's why you get the really dry, redundant ones happening because, you know, as far as I know, the government's not going to be accountable for a lot. That's just my experience. So I absolutely 100% support people writing their own land acknowledgements, following it up with an actionable item, and then sharing it. It might be a little bit of a challenge to get others to come on board with that because I don't know. Again, I think it's just some people's personal backgrounds, right? We can't all assume people came from loving, caring families, you know? I've met a young lady who grew up in she grew up in she was in the foster care system, sorry, till she was 18. So from the time she was 6 till she was 18, like, so she's not going to have a family connection, right? She doesn't want to think about that. And I told her, that's fine. You don't have to reflect on that. I said, but, reflecting on where you're at now, what can you do now? So in those situations, again, it's, like that's why I keep saying it's personal, it's reflective, like, but you're going to have the most impact because you're actually sitting there. If I were to come into your meeting and I heard your personal land acknowledgement and it's nothing like the organization's land acknowledgement, me as an Indigenous person, and this is me, Jamie Kishigo, I'm not speaking for every Indigenous person, that would make me feel good. Any other questions?
Well, seeing none, I really truly want to thank you for this, Jamie. As I said, it's been a very thoughtful approach that you took, very relational. We can really relate to it, and it's given us a lot to think about. And I love the links to the resources that you put in as well. So I think, as I say, we've got a lot to think about. So thank you so very, very much.
You're welcome. And if there's any questions, I know there was another resource I was going to show you, but you'll play with it, you'll get to know it. It'll be in the resources of the PowerPoint, and then you can explore it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be glad to help.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, everyone.